The heavy brass deadbolts of the five-star restaurant slid shut with a deafening clack. No one noticed except the terrified waitstaff and the ruthless head of the Chicago syndicate. As the arrogant finance bro kept insulting his curvy ex-girlfriend's body, he had no idea he was already a dead man. The rain over Chicago was relentless, slicking the neon-lit streets of the Gold Coast and battering the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lorelia. Inside, the atmosphere was a masterclass in curated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, honeyed glow over mahogany tables, and the air was thick with the scent of white truffles, aged Barolo, and old money. Nora Cunningham sat in a velvet booth near the center of the dining room, her fingers tracing the condensation on her water glass. She wore an emerald green silk wrap dress that clung perfectly to her soft plush curves. For the first time in months, she felt beautiful. She felt powerful. But the man sitting across from her was doing everything in his power to strip that away. "You really ordered the risotto, Nora," Braden Cole sneered, his eyes dropping to her plate before flicking up to her face with manufactured pity. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting the cuffs of his overly tailored Brooks Brothers suit. "I mean, we aren't together anymore, so I guess I shouldn't care. But you'd think after a breakup, a woman would want to, hit the gym. Not drown her sorrows in carbs." Nora's jaw tightened, but her expression remained perfectly blank. She didn't flinch. She didn't let the tears fall, though the sting of his words was a familiar, toxic burn. Braden had always been like this, a handsome, superficial leech who built his boutique investment firm using her brilliant financial models, only to dump her the moment he secured his first seven-figure hedge fund client. He had cited diverging lifestyles as his reason for leaving. Tonight was supposed to be a simple 10-minute meeting. Nora had summoned him to Lorelia to sign the final dissolution papers for the LLC they had co-founded. She chose this restaurant for a very specific reason, one Braden was entirely oblivious to. "Just sign the papers, Braden," Nora said, her voice a calm, modulated hum amidst the clinking of fine silver and soft jazz. She slid the manila folder across the table. Beside Braden sat Chloe, a 20-something model with razor-sharp cheekbones and a waist the size of Nora's thigh. Chloe looked deeply bored, sipping a martini and occasionally glaring at Nora as if her very existence was a health code violation. "I'll sign them when I'm ready," Braden snapped, irritated by Nora's lack of an emotional breakdown. He wanted tears. He wanted validation that losing him had destroyed her. Instead, he was met with the cold, calculating eyes of a woman whose intellect vastly eclipsed his own. This is exactly why I left. You're stubborn. You take up too much space, Nora. Physically and emotionally. No man at my level wants a liability on his arm. I needed someone who fits into my world." He gestured proudly toward Chloe. "Someone who knows discipline." A few heads at adjacent tables turned. Braden's voice had carried. He was making a scene, attempting to publicly humiliate the heavy ex-girlfriend to elevate his own fragile ego. But Braden didn't know who Nora really was. To the IRS, Nora Cunningham was an unremarkable freelance data analyst, but in the deep, encrypted shadows of the Midwestern underworld, she was the ghost. She was the absolute best forensic money launderer in North America. She was the titanium-spined architect who had single-handedly untangled a $60 million federal trap, saving the Valenti crime syndicate from a devastating RICO indictment. She routinely swam in shark-infested waters, outsmarting FBI cyber divisions and rival cartel hackers without ever leaving her ergonomic desk chair. Braden was a guppy trying to bite a leviathan. More importantly, Braden didn't know where he was. Lorelia wasn't just a Michelin-starred hotspot. It was the crown jewel of the Valenti Syndicate's legitimate real estate holdings. And sitting in the shadows of the VIP mezzanine above them, nursing a glass of bourbon, was the apex predator of Chicago himself, Roman Valenti. Roman's eyes, dark and cold as a frozen lake, were fixed entirely on Nora. For 6 months, the notoriously ruthless mafia boss had been quietly, deeply obsessed with his brilliant accountant. He worshipped the sharp, beautiful mind that protected his empire, but his obsession extended far beyond her intellect. He tracked her every movement. He found the soft, generous curve of her hips and the defiant tilt of her chin utterly intoxicating. He had stayed in the shadows, keeping his dangerous world at arm's length from her, watching over her like a dark guardian angel. Until tonight. From the mezzanine, Roman watched Braden point a condescending finger at Nora's chest. Roman's knuckles turned white around his crystal tumbler. The glass let out a sharp, barely audible crack as it fractured under his immense grip. Nora looked up, her gaze bypassing Braden completely, drawn by an invisible magnetic pull to the darkened glass of the mezzanine. Even through the shadows, she felt the oppressive, electric weight of Roman's stare. "Are you even listening to me?" Braden demanded, slamming his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "I'm telling you that you need to lower your expectations in life, Nora. Look at you. You're soft. You're an embarrassment to be seen with." Nora finally looked at him. She didn't reach for her napkin to dab away tears. Instead, a slow, dark smile touched the corner of her lips. "Braden," Nora said softly, her voice carrying a chilling sense of finality. "You really shouldn't have raised your voice in this restaurant." High above the dining floor, Roman Valenti stood up. He was a massive, imposing figure, 6'4" of lethal muscle wrapped in a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit. A faint, jagged scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from the night he violently dismantled the rival Kozlov faction. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Roman merely raised 2 fingers. Down on the floor, the transformation was instantaneous and terrifyingly silent. The elegant, tuxedo-clad maitre d' stepped smoothly to the grand mahogany entrance. He flipped the gilded brass lock. Clack! He pulled down the heavy velvet privacy curtains. Swoosh! Then he slid the secondary iron deadbolts into place. Clack, clack. The ambient jazz music died instantly as the pianist abruptly closed the fallboard over the keys and vanished into the kitchen. The elite waitstaff, men who were hand-picked not for their culinary knowledge, but for their proficiency with a suppressed firearm, began quietly tapping the shoulders of the few other patrons in the restaurant. With whispered apologies and complimentary bottles of wine, the civilians were swiftly escorted out the side exit. Within 90 seconds, the sprawling, opulent dining room was entirely empty. Empty save for Nora, Braden, Chloe, and the 15 heavily armed men in suits now forming a silent perimeter around the room. Braden finally stopped talking. He looked around, his smug expression melting into profound confusion, followed by the first creeping spike of genuine terror. What's happening?" Chloe whispered, her manicured hands trembling as she dropped her martini glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the dead silence. I don't know," Braden stammered, looking toward the locked doors. "Excuse me, we're paying customers. Why are the doors locked?" Nobody answered him. Instead, the rhythmic, heavy sound of leather shoes descending the spiral glass staircase drew all attention to the center of the room. Roman Valenti walked down the steps with the slow, predatory grace of a man who owned the air. Everyone else was breathing. Flanking him were his 2 top capos, men with necks as thick as tree trunks and dead, unblinking eyes. Braden swallowed hard. Even a bottom-feeding finance bro knew the face of the Valenti Don. The syndicate owned the city's ports, the unions, and half the judges. To cross paths with Roman Valenti was to stare into the abyss. Assuming Roman was here on other business and trying to salvage his own ego, Braden plastered on a terrified, sycophantic smile and stood up. Mr. Valenti, it is an absolute honor. I'm Braden Cole, CEO of Apex Capital. I've been trying to get a meeting with your wealth management division for... Roman didn't even look at him. He walked straight past Braden's outstretched hand, completely ignoring his existence, and stopped at Nora's side. The terrifying Mafia Boss's aura shifted instantly. The violent, icy menace radiating from him dissolved into a deep, consuming reverence. Roman reached out, his large, rough, tattooed hand gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind Nora's ear. "Is your meal satisfactory, Mia Regina?" Roman's voice was a low, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver straight down Nora's spine. "The risotto is usually excellent, but if you prefer something else, I will have the chef prepare it personally." Braden stared, his jaw practically hitting the floor. His eyes darted between his embarrassing ex-girlfriend and the most dangerous man in the Midwest. Nora? You know him?" Nora leaned subtly into Roman's touch, the warmth of his hand a stark contrast to the coldness she had endured for years. "Roman and I do some business together," she replied smoothly. Roman's dark eyes finally slowly turned to Braden. The gentleness vanished, replaced by a gaze so utterly devoid of mercy that Braden's knees buckled. Roman stepped forward, invading Braden's personal space. "You have a remarkably loud voice for a dead man," Roman whispered. Braden backed up, crashing into the table. I didn't know. I didn't know she was with you." "I swear to God, Mr. Valenti, it was just a lover's quarrel. We have history." "History," Roman repeated, testing the word on his tongue like a bad vintage of wine. "You think you have history with her? You think you have the right to speak to my shadow, my brilliant architect, the woman who holds my entire empire in her beautiful hands, and tell her she is an embarrassment?" Roman moved with blinding speed. His hand shot out, grabbing Braden by the throat and slamming him down onto the table. Crystal glasses shattered, and silverware clattered to the floor. Chloe screamed and scrambled into the corner, weeping hysterically. "She takes up too much space," Roman hissed, leaning over Braden's choking, purple face. "This woman is a goddess. Her mind is sharper than any blade I own. Her body is a masterpiece that I would burn this entire goddamn city down to protect. And you, a pathetic, insignificant parasite, dared to insult her in my house?" Nora watched, her pulse racing. Not with fear, but with an intoxicating rush of adrenaline. She had spent her life hiding her brilliance, shrinking herself down to make weak men feel tall. And here was a monster, a true apex predator, kneeling at her altar and demanding the world do the same. "Please," Braden gasped, clawing weakly at Roman's iron grip. "Take my company. Take everything. Just let me go." Roman chuckled, a dark, vibrating sound. He released Braden's throat just enough to let him pull in a pathetic, ragged breath. "Your company?" Roman snapped his fingers. One of his capos stepped forward, handing Roman an encrypted tablet. Roman tossed it onto Braden's chest. "Look at the screen, Braden." Coughing violently, Braden forced his eyes to focus on the tablet. It was the master dashboard for Apex Capital's offshore holding accounts. He watched in real time as the balances, $17 million of investor funds, plummeted to absolute zero. Nora routed your entire miserable life's work into a phantom shell company in the Caymans exactly 4 minutes ago, while you were busy criticizing her diet, Roman stated coldly. He looked back at Nora, a dark smirk playing on his lips. Isn't that right, Tesoro? Nora picked up her napkin, calmly wiping her mouth. It took 3 minutes, actually. His encryption was embarrassingly basic. The silence inside Lorelia was heavy, broken only by the sound of Braden's ragged, panicked breathing. He stared at the tablet screen, his complexion turning a sickly shade of ash grey. The numbers continued to scroll, flashing a merciless crimson text. Balance, $0. Transaction complete. This is a mistake, Braden whispered, his voice cracking as he looked up at Nora. The arrogance that had defined him for years had vanished, replaced by a raw, naked terror. Nora, please, that's not just my money. That's my client's capital. That's the Vanguard Fund. If that money is gone, I'm ruined. They'll put me in federal prison. They'll kill me. Nora leaned back in her chair, casually crossing one leg over the other. The green silk of her dress parted slightly, revealing the smooth, full curve of her thigh. She looked entirely at ease, a stark contrast to the trembling man before her. You should have done your due diligence, Braden, Nora said, her voice dripping with cold disappointment. When you stole my algorithms to build Apex Capital, you didn't realize I left a back door in the code. I always keep a back door. And when you accepted that massive 7-figure injection from the Vanguard Fund last month, you didn't bother to check who was actually funding it, did you? Braden blinked, uncomprehending. It was a private equity firm out of Delaware. It was a front, Nora countered, her eyes flashing with a dangerous brilliance. Vanguard Holdings belongs to Dominic Barrett, the head of the Detroit outfit. He's been trying to establish a money-laundering pipeline into Chicago for the last 2 years. He targeted your firm because he knew you were greedy, stupid, and easily manipulated. But more importantly, he knew you used to be with me. Roman's grip on Braden's collar tightened, lifting him a few inches off the shattered glass on the table. Dominic thought he could use a pathetic piece of garbage like you to map out Nora's digital footprints, Roman growled, his face inches from Braden's. He wanted to find the genius who keeps the Valenti family's finances invisible to the feds. He thought if he broke you, or used you, he could get to her. And by extension, get to me. Chloe let out another sharp sob from the corner, wrapping her arms around her knees. Braden looked as though he might faint. He had thought he was playing in the big leagues of high finance, completely oblivious to the fact that he was nothing more than a tethered goat meant to draw out a tiger. I didn't know, Braden cried, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. Nora, I swear, I didn't know anything about Detroit or the Mafia. I just wanted the capital. Please tell him to let me go. We loved each other once, remember? You're a good person. You're sweet. You wouldn't do this to me. Roman's jaw clenched, a terrifying vein throbbing in his temple. He raised his fist, ready to cave Braden's face in for daring to invoke their past relationship. But before he could strike, Nora placed a gentle, manicured hand on Roman's forearm. Let him go, Roman, she murmured. Roman paused, his entire body rigid with lethal intent. For a second, it looked as though he might ignore her, but the absolute devotion he held for her won out. He slowly lowered his fist, though his grip on Braden's throat remained ironclad. He looked at Nora, searching her face. He insulted you, Mia Regina. He tried to make you feel small. In my world, A man pays for that with his tongue. And he is paying, Nora replied smoothly, standing up from the booth. She stood at her full height, her voluptuous figure exuding an undeniable, commanding authority. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a sovereign ruling over her court. Look at him, Roman. He has no money, no reputation, and within 24 hours, Dominic Barrett will realize his laundering pipeline has been drained and exposed. Braden is already a walking corpse. Killing him here just ruins the carpet. A dark, appreciative smile broke across Roman's harsh features. He loved this side of her. He loved that beneath her soft, voluptuous beauty lay a mind as cold and calculating as a steel trap. She didn't need him to fight all her battles. She just needed him to provide the heavy artillery while she dismantled their enemies piece by piece. You heard her, Roman hissed, shoving Braden away with enough force to send him crashing onto the floor. Get out of my sight. If you are still in the city of Chicago by sunrise, I will personally feed you to the concrete foundations of the new pier. Braden didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to his feet, entirely ignoring Chloe, and ran toward the side exit, his expensive shoes slipping on the spilled wine. Chloe cast a terrified look at Nora, then hurried after him, the echo of her heels fading into the distance. But the relief in the room was short-lived. Suddenly, the overhead crystal chandeliers flickered. The soft, ambient light died, plunging the vast restaurant into a dim, shadow-drenched twilight, powered only by the emergency backup generators. From the front entrance, a heavy, rhythmic thud echoed through the glass doors. Thud. 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 Roman's capos instantly drew their weapons, the sharp click-click of firearms being readied filling the room. Roman stepped in front of Nora, his massive frame shielding her completely as he pulled a customized black semi-automatic from his shoulder holster. Roman, Nora whispered, her hand moving to the small, encrypted smartphone in her clutch. My network alerts just went off. The outer security cameras at the perimeter are dead. We have a breach. Roman didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed into slits as he stared at the heavily reinforced glass doors of Lorelia. Dominic Barrett didn't just want to use Braden, Roman said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, lethal register. He knew we would trace the funds. He followed him here. He's trying to take the crown in one night. The front glass of the restaurant didn't shatter. It exploded. A heavy-duty SUV rammed through the barricaded mahogany doors, showering the foyer in glittering shards and splintered wood. Before the dust could even settle, automatic gunfire tore through the darkness, bright muzzle flashes illuminating the carnage like a twisted strobe light. Down! Roman roared, throwing his weight over Nora as they dived behind the thick, marble-topped bar structure. Bullet strikes chipped away at the fine stone above them, raining white dust down onto Nora's dark hair. The restaurant erupted into a war zone. Roman's men returned fire with disciplined, lethal precision, the thunderous booms of their weapons echoing off the high ceilings. The smell of expensive truffles and fine wine was instantly replaced by the acrid, metallic stench of gunpowder and burning rubber. Nora pressed her back against the bar, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her mind remained perfectly clear. Fear was an emotion she couldn't afford right now. She opened her clutch, pulling out her modified laptop, which was barely the size of a notebook. Nora, stay here, Roman commanded, firing 3 precise shots over the bar, rewarded by a distant grunt and the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. My men will clear the floor. I'm getting you out through the kitchen tunnel. No, Roman. Listen to me, Nora said, her fingers already flying across the keyboard with blinding speed. There are 3 SUVs outside. They've blocked the alleyways. If you go out into the tunnel, you're walking into a funnel trap. Dominic brought at least 20 mercenaries from the Detroit docks. Roman shot her a quick, fierce glance, his dark eyes burning with a mixture of intense worry and absolute awe. Even with bullets flying and blood spilling just yards away, she was analyzing the battlefield. "Can you shut them down?" Roman asked, reloading his weapon with a practiced, seamless motion. "I'm already in the city's traffic and grid management system," Nora muttered, her eyes reflecting the pale blue light of her screen. "Give me 30 seconds. Outside, Dominic Barrett's mercenaries were pushing forward, using tactical shields to advance through the dining room. They were professional, ruthless, and gaining ground. One of Roman's capos fell, clutching a shoulder wound. Nora hit a final, decisive key on her laptop. Now! Instantly, the restaurant's automated fire suppression and security protocols went haywire. The heavy iron security shutters, designed to protect the restaurant from riots, began slamming down throughout the building, trapping half of Dominic's men in isolated corridors and cutting them off from their support vehicles. Simultaneously, the overhead industrial sprinkler system activated, dumping thousands of gallons of water directly onto the attackers, blinding them and ruining their night vision optics. "Move!" Roman ordered his remaining men. Taking advantage of the sudden chaos, Roman vaulted over the bar with terrifying agility for a man of his size. He moved like a demon in the mist, taking down 2 disoriented mercenaries with brutal, close-range shots. He was a force of nature, an unstoppable machine of violence protecting what was his. From the shattered entrance, a large, broad-shouldered man in a heavy trench coat stepped through the ruined doorway, a tactical rifle in his hands. It was Dominic Barrett himself. He looked around the flooded, ruined restaurant, his eyes locking onto Roman. "Valenti!" Dominic shouted over the roar of the alarms and sprinklers. "Your empire ends tonight. You're getting soft, hiding behind a fat accountant." Roman's face contorted into something primeval. The insult to Nora triggered a rage so deep it bypassed all tactical logic. Roman lunged forward, but before Dominic could raise his rifle, a sharp, high-pitched electronic squeal echoed from Dominic's own tactical earpiece. Dominic screamed, dropping his rifle and clutching his ears as the localized audio feedback, triggered by Nora rerouting the restaurant's high-frequency sound system into their communication channel, shattered his eardrums. In that split second of distraction, Roman closed the distance. He tackled Dominic to the ground, the 2 heavy men crashing into the flooded floor. The fight was short, brutal, and entirely one-sided. Roman channeled every ounce of his protective obsession into his fists, slamming Dominic into the marble tiles until the Detroit underboss lay completely still, broken and defeated. The remaining mercenaries, realizing their leader was down and their communications were entirely compromised, began to flee into the rainy Chicago night. The alarms slowly faded, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the heavy breathing of the survivors. Roman stood up, wiping a streak of blood from his cheek. He didn't look at Dominic's unconscious body. He didn't look at his men. His eyes immediately sought out the bar. Nora stepped out from the shadows. Her emerald dress was damp, her hair slightly disheveled, and her laptop was tucked safely under her arm. She stood amidst the wreckage of the finest restaurant in the city, looking entirely unbothered. Roman walked toward her, his heavy steps splashing in the shallow water. When he reached her, he dropped his weapon to the floor. He didn't care about the crime scene. He didn't care about the police response that would need to be bribed away. He reached out, his massive hands framing her face, his thumbs wiping away a smudge of drywall dust from her cheek. "You are a wonder," Roman whispered, his voice trembling with a rare, raw emotion. He pressed his forehead against hers, inhaling the scent of her, feeling the steady, resilient beat of her heart. "They thought you were a liability. They thought you were someone I could afford to lose. They don't understand that you are the only thing keeping me alive." Nora wrapped her arms around his neck, leaning her lush, soft body into his hard frame. She felt the fierce, possessive warmth of his embrace, a warmth she knew would protect her for the rest of her days. "I told you, Roman," Nora whispered against his lips, a small, confident smile forming. "I take up space, and I'm not going anywhere." Roman kissed her then, a deep, possessive, desperate kiss that tasted of rain, adrenaline, and absolute victory. He didn't care about the world outside. In the ruins of Lorelia, the Mafia Boss had found his queen, and the city of Chicago would never be the same again. If this gritty tale of dark romance and underworld loyalty kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to smash that like button and share this video with your friends. What did you think of Nora's epic revenge on her ex? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another high-stakes storytelling experience. See you in the next chapter.